Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Your Story Matters Here podcast, a ministry of Dutilh Church in Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania. My name is Tom Parkinson. I'm the senior pastor at Dutilh Church. And here at Your Story Matters Here, we look for God's fingerprints in the stories of people from our church and wider community. We release a new episode on the second Wednesday of every month, so be sure to click subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcasting app. Today, we have a very special guest on Your Story Matters Here. This is one of the first people I met when I came to Dutilh Church about 8 years ago. And many of you could say that he's one of the first people you met when you came to Dutilh Church as well. He's been a member here since 1970. That's 53 years ago. Please welcome to Your Story Matters Here, Clyde Cameron. Hello, Clyde.
Hello, Pastor Tom.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking.
I think we're all excited to hear a little bit of your story, Clyde.
Oh, it's a story for sure.
It is. Well, Clyde, your story begins in Harlansburg, PA, small place. Your dad owned his own auto mechanic shop, and that's where you grew up. So give us kind of some of the highlights. What are some of your favorite memories of your childhood?
Well, some of them probably just being with my dad, because the business was right next door to our house. And so, Dad was always there. And so he was a big inspiration and a big help. And he guided me along the way and gave me opportunities that a lot of people don't have. At a very young age, I could work in the garage, roll around on a creeper under a car and get greasy, and I love being dirty. And also, I had the opportunity to work in the out at the candy counter, and at the candy counter, I learned to talk to people. I learned to count change. I learned to pump. I get to go outside and pump gas, and that was back in the day when you pumped gas, and then you cleaned the windshield and checked the oil and did all those kinds of things.
So what were people paying for candy at the counter in those days?
There was two sizes. There was a nickel and a dime.
A nickel and a dime.
A nickel and a dime.
And what were people paying for the gasoline?
21.9 whenever I started pumping it. And, of course it went up, but it was
21.9 is 21 and 9 cents.
That's right, for a gallon of gas.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can't even just squeeze the handle for 21.9 these days.
Oh, I noticed that the other day. Yes.
Very cool. So in the midst of growing up there and learning all those lessons at your dad's shop and at the candy counter, you also developed quite a love for sports from early on. So when did you first get into sports? What sports did you play when you were younger?
Well, I had two older brothers, and so they guided me into a lot of different sports. We played basketball. We had a basketball hoop set up in a garage, but we loved baseball. Baseball was the big thing, and when we weren't playing it, we were listening to it. That was back. There was Rosie Rosewell we used to listen to on the radio, and then Bob Prince and that sort of thing. We followed the Pirates closely, but baseball was the sport. I loved the game, and I loved to do things related to it.
Speaking of the Pirates, you actually got to try out for the Pirates.
I did. I got to try out for the Pirates. As a high school and American Legion baseball player, I got to play a lot of baseball, and so there was a particular umpire in the area of Newcastle who was a scout for the Pirates. And he thought he saw something in me. And so he made sure the Pirates knew about it, and they got in touch with me, and I went and tried out. But, it's like a lot of things. They didn't see in me what I saw in myself or what that umpire happened to see. But it was a great experience because I got to be there with Pie Trainer, who hit me ground balls. And I forget who the pitcher was, but I was kind of a gap hitter. I wasn't a power hitter, but I was kind of a gap hitter, and I was able to put a couple balls out to the ivy and in center field there at Forbes Field. So that was a pretty exciting time.
That is pretty exciting.
Yes.
And if anybody out there is a baseball fan, all those names mean something. If you're not a baseball fan, maybe they don't, but that's a pretty big deal. And I've always heard that when it comes to professional sports, that baseball is one of the hardest ones to make it in. I mean, they're all
Yeah.
hard, but that
Mhm.
baseball particularly, it's hard to make it in the pros.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, but yeah, for sure. But I was lucky enough to at least have the opportunity. I got to play a lot of baseball when I was a teenager, growing up, and it was a great experience.
so
So
you had just a childhood full of fond memories. You learned your work ethic there. You learned to love baseball, and in the midst of that, somewhere along the way, your faith became important to you.
it
And so,
did.
talk about the beginnings of your faith journey. When did you first start to follow Jesus? When did you first start to be active in a church?
Yeah, well, you know what? I was pretty active in the church at a young age, but probably, um, you know, just traveling through the elementary years of school and getting into early teenage and so on. There was kind of a tug. There was kind of tug at you, And we had this pastor, and there's a story about this we might go into, we might not, but anyhow, there was this pastor who every Sunday, he would be up there, he'd be preaching. And this was at a Baptist church, and he'd be preaching. He just like he was talking to me, and so I accepted the Lord. I accepted the Lord and became baptized, just a lot like Dawn did the other day.
Mm.
That was we had a little pool at the front of the church, and they opened it up, and they had baptisms there, and it was an experience, and that memory has stayed with me for a life.
How old were you then?
I was 13,
13 years old.
13 years old.
I love what you say that you felt like the preacher was talking to you.
Mhm.
And people will sometimes say that to me. They'll be like, I felt like you were talking to me when you were preaching. And I always say, if that's what's happening to you, that's the Holy Spirit.
That's right. That's what it was. Just another side story about that. Now, this, in later years, um, this pastor, this pastor, happened to be well. I dated his granddaughter first of all. His granddaughter was this cute little girl, and she would come to visit in the summer, and I'd date her through the summer. Then she'd go back to her home in Indiana in the fall, and it was one of those things. But anyhow, later on, I started dating this girl at Slippery Rock. Her name was Sherry, pretty nice girl, pretty sharp and everything. Had a lot of energy and a lot of spunk, and we made a connection, and lo and behold, that pastor that baptized me was Sherry's great uncle,
Hmm.
and I dated Sherry's cousin. Ah, how about that?
Sounds like you're from a small part of the world when those are
It
the
is.
connections.
That's right. It
We,
is small part.
it's so fitting that you bring up your wife, Sherry, who you met at Slippery Rock, because it's in some ways strange to do this interview without Sherry sitting next to you, because the two of you, you can't think of Clyde without Sherry, right? The two of you
That's
just go
right.
together. You've been married how many years now?
We've been married 58,
58 years.
58
You
years.
met at Slippery Rock,
We
and then
did.
you both went into teaching
We did.
at North Allegheny High School.
North Hills
North,
North Hills in the elementary.
okay, North
Yes.
Hills, and you were a phys ed
Phys ed
teacher.
teacher. I was.
And how long did you teach phys ed?
I taught phys ed for 35 years in the North Hills.
So tell us a bit about teaching phys ed, and what was that like? What did you love about it?
Well, first of all, I love the energy of the kids, and that's not just the energy, but their willingness to just to have a good time and to work hard, and they did that for me. It was a fun time. They had fun, I had fun. It was like it's like my dad said, Clyde, all you did all your life was play games, and that's kind of true. But they were, very receptive of my way of teaching, and it was a great career.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I understand you had a pretty famous student in your gym class,
I,
LeVar Arrington.
I did. I had LeVar when he was in the kindergarten, first and second grade. Uh,
And for those of you that don't know, LeVar Arrington was a star linebacker at Penn State, went on to have a very good career in the NFL, but he got his start at Clyde Cameron's gym class.
That's right. Yes, he would come in and say, "Hey, Mr. Cameron, watch this." and he would do handsprings and cartwheels and everything across the gym. He was an amazing talent. He was very unusual.
Well, Clyde, one of the things I know about you is you are a people person. You talk about learning those people skills at the candy counter. And you also love sports. And I see the way in which your love for sports and your love for people really come together in teaching. And I know you're an encourager. I know that you love to watch kids play and develop in sports. You've come to my own son's ball games from time to time. So tell us a little bit in your teaching career, what role did your faith play in the way that you approached teaching students every day?
Well, I think probably just to be an example. It just to be a person that the kids could trust, a person that tried to make a difference in their lives. Just a couple years ago, an example is that and I don't know how you judge this, but this young fellow, we were at the Big C. I was at the Big C, and this fella came over. He says, "Mr. Cameron," and I said, "Oh well, yeah. How are you?" And I didn't recognize him at the time, but he told me his name and that I had him in elementary school. He says, "I just always knew you were a Christian." And so, what it was that made him think that or say that, I would hope it was just be that I was an example, and I used to sing when the saints come marching in, and he said that was really something whenever you did that, and the kids would march and do I'd have them do different things during that song. So, and I was quite a singer.
I'm sure you were. I know you're quite a dancer too. So the gospel says, Jesus said, they'll know that you're a Christian by your love, by your fruit, the fruit of your love. So if you show love to other people and the Christ shines through you, and that definitely was happening in your school years. So it was 1970 when you and Sherry moved to Cranberry.
Exactly.
And one of the first things you did was look for a church.
That's right.
And you came to this church, and I think Pastor McLeister was here then.
That's correct.
And he paid you a special visit. You ought to tell us about this visit from Pastor McLeister.
Pastor McLeister came to our house, and he just was a warm person. He came, and we just had a conversation. And Dutilh was not the first church we came to. We went to several churches, some of them Baptists, some Presbyterians, and some people would say, "Why'd you pick the Methodist Church?" Well, John McLeister came, and he said, "Clyde and Sherry, the most important thing is that you find a church that you're going to be comfortable in." He said, "It doesn't have to be Dutilh," but he said, "You find a church in this community and become a part of that church and become a part of the community." And, that was pretty much what it took to get us to come to Dutilh. And there were some great people here at the time that encouraged us and welcomed us. People that most of the people that are listening to this don't know because they've since passed or they have moved away or whatever. But yeah, it was a warm feeling. He was very warm, very comforting, and easy to talk to.
Well, that was 53 years ago, and you and Sherry have been active in this church ever since. And as you say, many of our people at Dutilh don't go back that far, partly because Cranberry has changed so much, and the growth of Cranberry has really happened in the last 25 or 30 years. And so a lot of people don't remember the 70s and 80s in this church, but you do. So if you had to characterize it, how has our church changed over the years? And what's never changed? What's always remained the same?
The friendliness has always been the same. Everyone is welcoming and friendly, and for the most part, and that stayed the same. The growth of the church has been a big change. That there are lots of whenever we started, there were not that many young families. They were middle age and older. Well, I would say middle age, 50s, early 60s, and that sort of thing. Their kids had grown. Our kids were still babies. and but they welcomed us. They took care of us. They more or less showed us the way, and and that's nice to see now, even because there's still there are lots of young families, and that's changed a lot more, and that's partially because there are more people,
Mhm.
but there are more young families, and it's nice to see on Sunday morning when you call them up for the children's message, all the flocks of kids that come up there, because that's nice to see.
Yeah, we're blessed to have that, and our
Yeah,
church has gone through a bit of uh, well, there's just a bunch of babies being born too, which
that's
is pretty
right.
fun. And
Yeah.
Jean Hoagland in the nursery has her hands full, but that's something we're always grateful for.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
you talk about the church was a little smaller then, and it's grown
Much
over the
smaller.
years. But there's been a lot of changes. People who have come to this church and then moved away, and but there's a constant theme that I hear from people is that you and Sherry have always been willing to be the ones to greet new folks. And whether it was me, the first day I came here, I was bringing my son to Bible school before I officially started as the senior pastor. And you and Sherry were the first people I saw at the front door. And it's not just me. I can think of many, many people in this church who would say the same thing. We came here, and Sherry and Clyde were two of the first people we met. So tell us a little bit about that. What motivates you and Sherry to be so open, hospitable, welcoming? What motivates you to walk across the room and say hello to somebody you've never met before?
Um, I I don't know. It's just something that you do. That's just we try to welcome. We try to keep. Yeah. I don't know how to explain it. It's just the way we are, and I think it goes back to my youth. My dad always said, "Listen, you're no better than anybody else. You just go and you can talk with anybody. They're not better than you. You're not better than them." And and that was important. Um, yeah, that's a hard question to answer for me. It's just what you do. It's
Well, I
just what
think
we
the
do.
fact that you do it naturally is because God has given you and Sherry a certain spiritual gifting. Because it's not natural for everybody. Some of
Yeah.
us, we feel comfortable with the people we know, and it takes a lot of courage and intentionality to be willing to reach out to somebody new. But you and Sherry are naturals at it.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
just what you
thank
do.
you. Thank you. I take it as a compliment.
It
It's
is a
not
compliment.
it's not something that we either one work at. It's just something that we try to be welcoming people, and and make people comfortable, make them feel comfortable, and make them feel good about themselves.
Well, I think
That's
there's a
what
whole
teaching
chorus of
was.
people at Dutilh Church that can say they've been made to feel welcome because of you and Sherry. You're very good at that. Very good at
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
Now, over the 53 years that you've been part of our church, there probably isn't anything our church does that you haven't been involved in some way. But let me just tell our listeners some of the ways you're involved today. Right? So you play ukuleles in our ukulele choir, and that's a talent you've just learned in the past few years. You lead a small group on Sunday mornings of faithful folks that meet for prayer and discussing the sermon and sharing life. You are active in our men's ministry and all the variety of activities that go on there. You've served as a mentor for confirmands in our confirmation program. And then a lot of people probably don't know this, but you're really one of the chief liaisons between us and the Center for Hope in Ambridge. And you're regularly taking food items out to the Center for Hope, or you're taking people out there to serve. And then beyond all that you're doing in the church, you're also very active in the Lions Club and doing a lot of community service through them. So, what motivates you to stay so active in the church and in the community and to get up every day and go serve? What motivates you?
Um, I think it's just it's just been something that's been ingrained in both Sherry and I in our lives. We grew up with the expectations of being involved, and and sometimes you're just led in a direction, and so I guess maybe it's hard to say no. I don't know.
Maybe it is. Well, but you always seem happy. I don't ever get the sense we're dragging you along.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Well, Clyde, we have a bunch of new people that have connected with our church in the last year. As a matter of fact, I'm really excited. In a few Sundays, we're going to have 18 adults join the church, become members of the church, and we're excited for that. As you look at the next generation of Dutilh members, and the next 53 years of Dutilh Church, what would you want to say to these new members it is that makes this church special?
Just just keep on with the friendliness, keep up with that atmosphere, and become involved, because becoming involved is how you make connections, and the connections are important. Connections are important, and you don't make connections unless you talk to people. You have to talk to people, and that's. I think the first thing I ask someone is where you're from, because that's one of the first ways you can make a connection with someone is where you're from, and yeah, and that's and then it just goes from there.
Yeah.
And
Where are you
so
from? And then you make
yeah,
a connection. Oh, I know something about that
that's
place.
right.
Yeah.
And and God works in you through that kind of stuff.
Great.
I believe.
Clyde, I could talk to you all day, but I got one more question for you, and this one's just for fun. And I promise that I'm not going to have fragile feelings about this. In 53 years, you've had 7 senior pastors at this church. You've had multiple associate pastors. Which one's your favorite?
Well, you know what? Favorite is something that is a relative thing. Right now, you're my favorite.
Oh, wow. I feel honored.
That's right. Right now, you're my favorite. But I've had pastors that I've really connected with. John McLeister was one of them. Doug Patterson was one of them, and and the others. There were others that at different connections each time. But you're special. The others were special in different ways. So,
Well, I got to tell you, now that you've said this, not only do I feel honored by your answer, but I also feel like I kind of fished for a compliment there, didn't I?
you did. You got it.
Thank
That
you
was
so
good.
much, Clyde. We really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate the opportunity, Tom. Thank you very much.
If you see Clyde Cameron at church, be sure to say hello. And if you don't say hello, he'll probably say hello to you, because that's the kind of guy he is. Hey, thanks so much for spending time on Your Story Matters here this month. We'll be back next month with another great story to tell. In the meantime, may the Lord bless you.